I've often complained that abortion clinics seem to be obsessed with the fetus because once they get rid of it, they lose interest in the mother to the point of not paying a whole lot of attention to her when she's in recovery. This is another death where this out of sight, out of mind, once the fetus is gone, cost a woman her life. I'm Christina with the Sisyphean Journal, and today is December 21st. So it was December 20th of 1997 when 27-year-old janitor went to Potomac Family Planning for her safe and legal abortion. She was 6 weeks pregnant and there for a D&C. Dr. Earl McLeod's anesthesiologist, Dr. Joanne Kelly, started an IV, and at least they hooked Jennifer up to monitors. So right now, we're way exceeding the standard of care I'm typically seeing in these abortions. There's actually a licensed doctor doing the abortion, a licensed anesthetist doing the anesthesia, and they've got the woman on monitors. Wow. These guys are going above and beyond the call of duty here. And the abortion took about 5 minutes, which is typical for your, high volume abortion mill. And Jennifer was transferred to recovery at 10:10 a.m. and she was put on an oxygen mask, which seems a little bit odd for recovery. Shouldn't her oxygen levels be stabilized and she's able to get enough oxygen on her own before you move her to recovery and leave her in other people's care? But they only put a blood pressure monitor on her, not one of those pulse oximeters. You've had them, they clip them on you at the doctor's office. It tracks your pulse and your blood oxygen saturation. They didn't use one of those. Now, her blood pressure was recorded at 112/60, which is a little bit low, and her pulse 103, which is pretty high. But then they removed the blood pressure monitor and put it on another patient. So there's Jennifer with no monitors on her at all. And Dr. Kelly went back to the procedure room without making sure that her patient was stable and safe to leave with no physician present. Now, 10 or 15 minutes later, a nurse noticed that Jennifer was still unresponsive. And she started to ask another assistant to go to the procedure room and ask Kelly to approve a dose of Zoloft, which is an antidepressant. I suppose you can say her respiration's depressed. But she changed her mind and asked another nurse to get approval for a dose of Zofran, which is an antiemetic. Okay, Jennifer's unresponsive. She's not vomiting. What is going through these people's heads? How well trained are they? So neither McLeod nor Kelly actually went over and assessed Jennifer, but instead, Kelly verbally complied with the odd request. Oh, sure, give her an anti-nausea drug without checking her out. So the nurse gave a dose of Zofran intravenously at about 10:25, but of course, that didn't help Jennifer to revive because vomiting wasn't her problem. So, oops, let me fix that scrolling. So the nurse then requested romazicon, which is a drug that would actually reverse the effect of the anesthetic. And again, without assessing the patient, Dr. Kelly gave her okay. The nurse administered the drug, but again got no response. And she put the blood pressure cuff back on. It's about time. And only then did she notice that her patient had no pulse. So she checked Jennifer's pupils and found them dilated. So she went and fetched Dr. Kelly, who this time came, started a second IV and started to perform CPR using a pediatric-sized bag valve mask, totally inadequate for an adult patient. But it was the only BVM they had on the crash cart. Meanwhile, McLeod's doing 2 other abortions before coming to the recovery room and checking on what's happening with his patient. Now, McLeod came in and he ordered epinephrine, ephedrine, and lidocaine to be administered, which are appropriate drugs for a cardiac arrest. But he didn't document her oxygen saturation because nobody had put a pulse oximeter on Jennifer. They do that. I've seen them do that in dentist offices when people are dopey from having their teeth pulled. He later claimed that Jennifer had been hooked up to a cardiac monitor, but he didn't document any cardiac rhythm, respiration, or a neurological exam. It wasn't until around 10:45 that McLeod told somebody to call 911. The paramedics began immediately performing appropriate resuscitation, including intubating Jennifer, which is a step that McLeod or Kelly should have taken, especially Dr. Kelly, since she was an anesthesiologist. She knew how to do this. They switched to an adult bag valve mask. It's about freaking time. Administered Narcan, epinephrine, and atropine, and then hooked Jennifer up to a cardiac monitor and a defibrillator, and they defibrillated Jennifer. Now, the medics took her to Shady Grove Adventist Hospital. On arrival, her pupils were fixed and dilated. Now, after aggressive resuscitation efforts, Jennifer's heart was restored to a stable rhythm, and she was admitted to the intensive care unit. But she died there at 4:15 a.m. the next morning. Now, the appalled paramedics reported McLeod to the medical board, which faulted him with failure to provide adequate and readily available post-operative monitoring equipment, failure to provide adequate emergency supplies. The board also required to get him his staff properly certified in CPR. How many times do I complain about this? They've got nobody who knows how to perform adequate CPR at these clinics. And Jennifer's family sued McLeod, the clinic, and other staff involved in her death. And McLeod is also the person who runs the Hillcrest Abortion Clinic in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where Kelly Morse died after being inadequately resuscitated. So, same stuff, different day with McLeod. As a quick addendum, I happened to check when I was looking for a picture of Hillcrest to share with you, and I found them getting in trouble in 2017. Kelly Morse had died in 1996. They still had inadequate supervision and recovery after all those years. Fortunately, the clinic did close. You can go to abortiondocs.org and look up Hillcrest and just see what a sloppy place that was.